I thought I had it all figured out. 15 years of marriage to Gavin, and I'd finally found something real with Jace. You know that feeling when you meet someone who just gets you? That's what happened when I started taking pottery classes downtown. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you're into these kinds of stories, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. Gavin was this intense financial advisor type, always calculating everything, treating our life like some spreadsheet he could optimize. Don't get me wrong, the man was brilliant with money. He'd grown my old 401k from like 80,000 to over 200 grand over the years. But God, living with someone who sees everything as numbers and projections, it gets exhausting. He had this way of looking at you, like he was assessing your market value or something. Meanwhile, Jace was everything Gavin wasn't. Creative, spontaneous, passionate about his art. We'd spend hours talking about dreams and possibilities while I helped him wedge clay. The way he looked at me, like I was this amazing woman worth discovering, not just another line item in his portfolio. When Jace would touch my hands to guide them on the pottery wheel, I felt more alive than I had in years. I started staying out later, claiming the classes ran long. Gavin would just nod and go back to his laptop, probably calculating compound interest or whatever. The man never questioned anything, just accepted my explanations with that same analytical detachment he applied to everything else. It made sneaking around almost too easy. I'd come home glowing from spending time with Jace, and Gavin wouldn't even look up from his financial reports. The guilt was there at first, but look, Gavin had checked out of our marriage emotionally years ago. He provided financially, sure, but when was the last time he asked about my dreams or really listened when I talked? With Jace, I felt seen. We started making plans. He needed investors for his studio space, and I had access to that retirement money Gavin had been growing. It felt like fate. Between us, I was getting tired of pretending everything was fine at home. Gavin would come back from work with that same focused intensity, talking about market fluctuations and client portfolios, like they were the most fascinating things in the world. Meanwhile, I was discovering this whole other side of myself with Jace. He'd tell me about his vision for the studio, how we could build something beautiful together. When he kissed me for the first time after class, one evening, it felt like waking up from a long sleep. The sneaking around became routine. I'd tell Gavin I was meeting girlfriends for dinner, then spend hours with Jace talking about art and life and possibilities. He made me feel young again, desired in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Sure, he needed financial backing for his dreams, but that felt romantic. Like I could be his patron, his muse, his partner, in creating something meaningful. I'd been planning how to tell Gavin for weeks. In my head, it would be this mature conversation where I'd explain how we'd grown apart, how I'd found someone who truly understood me. Maybe he'd be hurt, but he'd see that this was better for both of us in the long run. We could split things amicably, and I could start fresh with Jace. We went to Marcello's, our usual Italian place with those red checkered tablecloths. I was nervous but excited, finally ready to be honest about what I wanted. Halfway through the calamari, I put my fork down and looked at my hands. Gavin, I said quietly, I have to tell you something. I'm in love with someone else. I expected shock, anger, tears, something human. Instead, he just took a sip of water and stared at me with those calculating eyes. Good to know, he said, like I'd just told him the weather forecast. That was it. No emotion, no questions, nothing. The relief I'd expected to feel curdled into confusion. That's it, I asked, and good to know. What else is there to say? Alicia, you've made a new investment in your emotional portfolio. I'm just acknowledging the transaction. He said it so coldly, like our 15-year marriage was just another business deal gone bad. I wanted him to fight for me, to show some passion, to prove that I mattered to him. Instead, he just finished his calamari and ordered the veal parmesan like nothing had happened. The rest of dinner was this awful silence. When we got home, I told him I needed space to think and went to the guest room. He just nodded and said to take all the space I needed. Looking back, I should have recognized that tone. Gavin only got that detached when he was already 3 steps ahead, when he'd already run the numbers and decided on his next move. But I was too caught up in my own drama to notice the warning signs. I woke up the next morning expecting to find Gavin ready to talk, maybe even fight. Instead, I found a note on the kitchen counter and his wedding ring next to it. The note was typed. Of course it was typed, because God forbid Gavin show any actual emotion even in a breakup letter. Alicia, as per our conversation, you are moving on. So am I. I have initiated the liquidation of your IRA. The fund's a marital asset will be held for equitable division during the divorce proceedings, which my lawyer will initiate. He will be in touch. Gavin. My chest tightened like someone had squeezed all the air out of my lungs. That retirement account, my retirement account, had over $200,000 in it. Money I'd earned, money that was supposed to be my security. How could he just take it? I ran to the computer and tried to log into the account, but I couldn't access it. That's when I remembered. Years ago, when I'd rolled over my 401k, Gavin had convinced me to sign some power of attorney thing to make managing it easier. I'd trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, and he was so much better with financial stuff than I was. I called the brokerage company, and they confirmed it. All the investments had been sold, and the money was being transferred to some escrow account. It was legal. I'd given him the authority to do it. But it felt like theft. That was my money, my future, and he'd just stolen it because I'd been forthright about my feelings. I tried calling him, but he'd blocked my number. I drove to his office, but security wouldn't let me up. It was like he'd erased me from his life in less than 24 hours. The man I'd lived with for 15 years had vanished, replaced by this cold, calculating stranger who'd systematically cut off my access to everything. When I told Jace what Gavin had done, he was as shocked as I was. "He can't just steal your money like that," he said, holding me while I cried. "There has to be something we can do." That's when Jace suggested we take some of Gavin's stuff as collateral, just temporarily until we could get the money situation sorted out. Gavin had this collection of vintage synthesizers stored in a climate-controlled unit. They were worth a fortune, and he probably wouldn't even notice they were gone for a while. I still had a key to the storage unit from years ago. We went on a weekend when there was just some young kid working the desk. I told him I was Gavin's wife, which was still technically true, and that we were moving, so I needed to pick up some keyboards. The kid was sweet and helpful, even let us borrow a cart. We took the 3 most expensive ones. I knew which ones, because Gavin never shut up about their value. It felt like justice. He'd frozen my money, so I was taking something of equal value. Fair is fair. But apparently Gavin didn't see it that way. Instead of calling me to work things out like a normal person, he called the police. The police. Like I was some common criminal, instead of his wife of 15 years, trying to protect herself from his financial abuse. When the cops showed up at Jace's apartment, I couldn't believe it. They had a warrant and everything. Gavin had given them serial numbers, photos, appraisal documents. He'd planned this whole thing out like a military operation. They arrested both of us, and suddenly I was facing felony charges for trying to protect myself from my husband's theft. The worst part, Jace started looking at me differently after that. When his public defender told him he was facing serious jail time, he got scared. Really scared, and scared people do stupid things. Jace's lawyer convinced him to take a plea deal. He'd testify against me in exchange for reduced charges. The man I'd thrown away my marriage for the man I'd thought truly loved me sold me out to save his own skin the moment things got difficult. "I'm sorry, Alicia," he said when he told me, "but I can't go to prison for this. I have my whole life ahead of me." Just like that, our great love story was over. He'd gotten what he wanted from me, access to money and a good time, and now that it was complicated, he was done. I ended up with 2 years probation and a criminal record. 2 years. For trying to protect myself from Gavin's financial manipulation. The judge acted like I was some kind of master criminal instead of a woman who'd been backed into a corner by her vindictive husband. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare. My lawyer kept telling me we had a good case that Gavin's use of the power of attorney was aggressive and possibly abusive. But then the criminal conviction happened and everything changed. Suddenly, I wasn't the wronged wife anymore. I was the criminal who'd stolen from her husband during divorce proceedings. Gavin's lawyer was ruthless. He painted me as this manipulative woman who'd been planning to steal marital assets to fund my affair. He had phone records of Jace calling him begging for money. He had evidence of our business plan to use my retirement money for Jace's studio. Everything that had felt romantic and spontaneous was twisted into this calculated scheme. The judge awarded Gavin most of the retirement money, plus he got to deduct his legal fees from my share. After everything was said and done, I walked away with less than $60,000 from an account that had over $200,000 in it. $60,000 for 15 years of marriage. It's been 8 months since the divorce was finalized, and I'm still trying to piece my life back together. I'm living in this tiny apartment across town, working an entry-level job because my criminal record makes it impossible to get anything decent. Every day I wake up and remember that this is my life now, broke alone and branded as a criminal. The truth is, I'm furious. Not at myself. I mean, fine, maybe I could have handled things differently. But Gavin, he's the one who turned a simple relationship issue into this nuclear disaster. He could have tried counseling, could have fought for our marriage, could have shown some actual emotion, instead of treating me like a failed investment. Our mutual friends all sided with him, of course. Poor Gavin, they say. Alicia really did him dirty. Like I'm the villain in this story, instead of the woman who got systematically destroyed by a man who couldn't handle being left. They act like wanting to be loved and appreciated is some kind of crime. I saw him at the grocery store last month. He looked different. New clothes, confident posture, like he'd shed some weight he'd been carrying around. He was with some woman, not flashy or dramatic, just quietly pretty in that natural way some women have. She was laughing at something he'd said, and for a moment I saw a version of Gavin I'd forgotten existed. The man who used to make me laugh before everything became about numbers and projections. They didn't see me, thank God. I couldn't handle the humiliation of small talk, of pretending I was doing fine when clearly I wasn't. I ducked behind the cereal aisle until they left feeling pathetic and small. Last week, I finally swallowed my pride and sent Gavin an email asking for help with a security deposit for a better apartment. I told him I deserved at least that much after 15 years together. I never heard back. The email just disappeared into the void, like everything else I tried to say to him since that night at Marcello's. Look, maybe I wasn't perfect. Maybe I should have talked to him before I started seeing Jace. But what was I supposed to do, live the rest of my life feeling invisible and unappreciated? Gavin never even tried to understand what I needed. He just saw my unhappiness as another problem to solve with his cold logic. The numbers don't lie, as Gavin would say. And the numbers show that I lost everything while he came out ahead. I'm not saying I'm blameless here. I get that the whole thing with Jace's synthesizers was probably crossing a line. But Gavin pushed me to that point. He froze my money, cut off my access to everything, and then acted surprised when I fought back. Between us, I think he planned this whole thing. The way he moved so fast, the way he had all those documents ready for the police. Nobody's that organized unless they've been thinking about it for a while. Maybe he knew about Jace before I even told him. Maybe he was just waiting for an excuse to destroy me. I'm just a woman who wanted to be loved and got punished for it by a man who couldn't see past his own spreadsheets to fight for what we had. Yeah, I made mistakes, but I didn't deserve to lose everything. I didn't deserve to have my life blown up because I had the nerve to want something more than his cold, calculated version of love. The worst part is how satisfied he probably feels right now. New girlfriend, all the money, his precious reputation intact, while I'm branded as the criminal. He got exactly what he wanted, complete victory in his perfectly planned financial war. But that's who Gavin really is underneath all that quiet professionalism. Not the wronged husband everyone thinks he is, but a calculating man who destroyed his wife because she dared to leave him.